Well, again, welcome back to Portsmouth This Week. Our special guest today, which is 13 May 2016, is our Rhode Island's own Chief of Agriculture, Ken Ayars. Welcome to the show,
Thank
Ken.
you. Glad to be here.
I just wondered, at first, there's a lot to talk about because we're kind of a sort of a rural community changing into a, I don't know, suburban community, I guess you would say. But your job up there in Portsmouth is very important to us. I wonder if you could start off, though, by talking a little bit about your background and how you got into this.
Well, a long-time Portsmouth resident, actually. My family lived here for about 35 years. My brother's still in town. My dad was a Navy officer and went to the War College, and so we came to Portsmouth in '72. I live in Exeter now, but my family roots are agricultural in southern New Jersey, actually, where my parents are from. So both sides of the family farmed. Ended up getting a master's degree in agriculture from URI and started from there.
That's great.
I think it was the genes that eventually took over in college.
Did you go to Portsmouth High School? Or?
For a couple of years I did. Played soccer here as well, yeah.
Yeah. We were talking before and you said you finished your high school in Gitmo?
Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. That's right. My dad got transferred the last 2 years of high school, and that's where I graduated from.
Yeah, that's probably a unique background.
Very unique, yeah.
Okay, so how did you become the Chief of Agriculture?
Started off really at the kind of the bottom of the ladder at the Division of Agriculture almost 30 years ago now, and through a combination of, I guess I'd like to say, hard work and other opportunities, I managed to move my way up. I became chief in 1998, and it's been a very, very interesting, fascinating career. I think it's been fortunate that that career has spanned kind of the resurgence of agriculture in Rhode Island, which has really been a bright spot over the past 10 to 15 years, despite some of the challenges of the state's economy, which is improving overall, but agriculture stayed on a high level during some of the deepest parts of the recession.
Yeah. Well, I think that's in large part due to your efforts, so we appreciate it down here.
Many people say.
And I have to throw a shout out for my two favorite farmers, Louis Escobar and Nancy Parker Wilson, who both told me you're a great guy and doing a lot of good things for Rhode Island, so thank you. What do you do? What do you do exactly?
Heart and soul of what we do is to promote agriculture, help our farmers out, promote a locally based food system, and work to build it. The Division of Agriculture covers an awful lot of bases, ranging from regulating animal health in the state. We regulate all kennels and pet shops and municipal towns, facilities. We monitor the state for mosquitoes. We trap. We regulate pesticides. We monitor for invasive insects and diseases. We respond to numerous complaints about various issues. So we cover an awful lot of bases. And I've got a very talented and dedicated staff. But the heart and soul are certainly my efforts, and the spear of the thrust of the Division of Agriculture is to help out our farmers.
Yeah. How big is your staff, and how are you kind of organized?
It's relatively small, actually. There's about 18 full-time people.
Well, it is Rhode Island, after all.
That's right. We are a division of the Department of Environmental Management. We are one of maybe 2 states in the country that does not have a standalone cabinet-level Department of Agriculture. That was downsized 50 or 60 years ago. There is, though, an advantage to that, in that I'm embedded in DEM, and I have ready access to many people that I need to have access to do my job. Because a lot of what I do is working through regulatory issues, and to be able to go down the hall and talk to someone who's in wetlands or waste management is important. And so I don't have to go from department to department. I can do much of what I need to do to work out situations within DEM. And we're blessed now and in previous times with some very forward-thinking department directors. Janet Coyte's excellent. Has a clear agricultural interest and local food interest, and that helps me out a lot.
I noticed that one of your jobs here is mosquito abatement,
right?
And the Zika virus is in the news,
right?
And I just wonder, are you involved in, preparing or whatever for that?
We are. Dr. Alan Getman, who's my mosquito biologist, works closely with the Department of Health. What we do every year is we set traps throughout the state. That includes Portsmouth. We monitor the mosquitoes that we catch for certain viruses, which up to now have been things like Eastern equine encephalitis, West Nile virus.
Yeah.
And Zika now is on the radar screen. The other thing that we do in the off-season is we do a lot of salt marsh restoration work, and that includes in Portsmouth. So we take the off-season to make sure the ditches are clear, that salt marshes can work effectively, because that's a mosquito breeding ground for many species.
Now, so when we see something on the news that there are 2 cases of equine encephalitis found on X place, is that your work?
If it's found in the mosquito, yeah. So what we're doing is we're testing those mosquitoes.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the case, mosquitoes.
Right, right. That is our work. We take those mosquitoes, test them, trap them, and we work closely with the Department of Health in that regard.
We were talking before the show, but Portsmouth is originally very much a rural farm community.
Right.
But today the number of active farms has decreased a lot due to other pressures on the land. Is this happening in other parts of Rhode Island as well, or are we kind of unique here?
I wouldn't say you're unique, and as one who spent a long time in Portsmouth, I watched that happen certainly around my home as I was growing up. 80% of Rhode Island was probably once farmed historically, going back to colonial times. Dramatic decreases in farmland and farming due to several factors. This is not uncommon to Rhode Island. It's national.
Sure.
And there was a crisis point in the 1980s in which several things happened. Farmland Protection, Right to Farm Act, and other things like Farm Forest and Open Space came into play. And that was the beginning of a turnaround. The last actually 10 to 15 years have been an incredibly bright spot, and the number of farms has actually grown in the state. If you went back to 2002, the USDA counts every 5 years. The number of farms now compared to then is actually 40% higher in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
Right now we've got around 1,230 farms. So that's good. Many of the farms now are smaller than they used to be. It's a different type of agriculture than our fathers and forefathers practiced, with a heavy retail focus.
Yeah.
Farmers markets, roadside stands,
Right.
the thing that the type of work that Nancy Parker Wilson does and Louis Escobar. That's a big part of the resurgence, is making that retail connection.
Yeah, I went on your website, which is quite good actually. It's got a lot of information on it. And I noticed that census from 2012, I was kind of amazed that actually the number is going up.
It is going up, and that's good. I mean, it's people care about where their food comes from. They want to know who their farmers are. They want them to be part of their community. One of the motivating factors for us is our national food system and how we can make it locally based and sustainable. Despite the resurgence in agriculture, we estimate that Rhode Island produces about 1% of its own food. We estimate that figure in New England is about 10%. Our food, in many ways, moves West Coast to East Coast, South America to North America.
Yeah.
We're at the end of that pipeline. We want a far more robust and sustainable local food system, and agriculture is part of that.
Yeah, part of the reason for that, of course, just like all of global trade, is the prices are cheaper. People in other countries perhaps can afford to do these things in bulk and cheaper because of labor. Is the price of food an issue in this?
I don't think so. We produce a lot of food relatively cheaply in the country. We import a lot of food relatively cheaply. I think what we're talking about is food that often has traveled a long distance to get here. The average food miles from where it's produced to where it's consumed is about 1,300 to 1,500 miles.
Wow.
California has 45% of all the land in the country that's used for fruit and vegetable production. So it's centered on the West Coast for the most part. And there's vulnerabilities with that. You look at the drought, for example, in California. You recognize that we should be far more dispersed and locally based to the degree possible. And that frames agriculture in a nice way, because we realize the importance of our local farms. It's not just food. We've got sod and nursery farms in the state, which is actually about 50% of the total economy of agriculture. All important. But local is what we're all about.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, too, though, have ideas that these big conglomerate farms out in the Midwest and elsewhere provide a lot of our produce that could be produced and sold locally. In fact, maybe it is, but the local price might be higher.
It's definitely higher, and part of it's a supply and demand issue. We're not producing a lot of our food. It's relatively scarce if you look at the amount of food that we consume. Therefore, just like anything that you're talking about, the price is higher.
Yeah, exactly. We had a local farmer at a town council meeting. It's very vivid to me. I was just sitting in the audience a couple of years ago. He said the last crop of a farmer in Portsmouth is condos, is a condo development.
Right.
How do you deal with that? I mean, because the land is certainly worth more to that farmer if he sold the thing for condo development than if he. Farming is a tough life.
It is a tough life, and I growing up in an agricultural family, I understand how farmers think and know that oftentimes their retirement is based upon selling that land, that last transaction.
Yeah.
So you want to avoid it so that that's the decision that they have to make. And there's several strategies involved. Ultimately, an economically viable farm is best able to sustain withstand the pressures that force those decisions to be made. So business is our focus. We want farmers to be viable and do what we can to help them out. Other strategies are protecting them, buying the development rights to a farm, essentially giving them that cash in advance of retirement age so they can use it to support their business, lower the taxes on the property, have lower inheritance taxes, etc. The Aquidneck Island Land Trust is an incredible partner. The state has participated over the past 30 years in the protection of almost 100 farms all across Rhode Island, many working with the Aquidneck Island Land Trust. And then helping them out with regulatory issues, neighbor issues, et cetera, just dealing with the big picture for them.
Yeah, I noticed on your website you also offer grants for different things. Can you talk about some of those? And
relatively new program for us, which we're really happy about, is called the Local Agriculture and Seafood Act, with assistance from the General Assembly, supported by the governor. We've been able to offer a grant program in the past 3 years to help out farmers with, and often beginning farmers with capital needs that they have that they can't get from a bank. So we're talking about small grants, $20,000 or less. But as one farmer told me, I couldn't go to a bank to get it. I was not fundable by them, but this filled that gap. So we're trying to help them out, provide a ladder up.
What about agriculture? Are you folks involved in that as well?
I'm involved from a promotional standpoint. This CRMC, largely has the main regulatory focus there, but that's a really great story. There's over 50 aquaculture farms in Rhode Island. 10 years ago there would have been just a handful. The demand for local aquaculture projects is great. One thing that's helped that along is a much cleaner bay, much cleaner environment, and that goes in hand with supporting the industry. But that's a really bright spot for Rhode Island.
Yeah, I would think it would be. We are the ocean state after all.
That's right. And many people have had a hand in creating a far more cleaner environment. That's DEM's role as well.
Yeah. Now, do you have any programs that are kind of unique or focus on Aquidneck Island and Portsmouth?
I wouldn't say necessarily focus on Aquidneck Island. We have a kind of a statewide focus, but Aquidneck Island has, each part of the state has its unique set of circumstances, and so we do what we can to bend our programs to assist. Aquidneck Island is surrounded by water. Obviously, the farm land has been under extreme pressure for a long period of time. This is a part of the state where the development pressure has probably been amongst the highest, and we've deliberately focused farmland protection here. Louis Escobar is a good example where we worked with the Aquidneck Island Land Trust and the town to protect that farm. Another thing that we're really focusing on of late is our fishing community. Pier 9, which is a state pier in Newport, has the fishing fleet largely focused there, and we've done a lot in recent years to make sure that the local seafood is incorporated into the local food movement just as much as what our farmers produce, and that's an interesting and upcoming part of what we do.
Now, let's focus on where, Galilee and that area? Or?
Galilee, of course, is the center of things in the state. The fishing community in Rhode Island has largely had a relatively wholesale mentality. They're much like farmers were 15, 20 years ago, and we're focusing and working with them of late to think about retail connections to help them out with marketing local species of fish that they typically catch, which may not find its way into the market in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
A lot of what we catch in Rhode Island is exported seafood-wise. Most of what we eat is imported seafood-wise. So we want to change those dynamics and increase the awareness and the importance of what our local fishermen bring in.
Yeah, well, like farming, fishing is a tough trade. I have a good friend that's a fisherman, and that's a hard life.
It is, and it's, the other thing about them, the fishing community, is many people tell them what they can and can't catch.
Absolutely.
That's far different than agriculture.
Yeah.
And
different kind of pressures.
Different kind of pressures, right?
Yeah. How can people, if people are interested, farmers or anybody else, just to find out about your programs and what you guys do for farmers, how can they find out about it?
My email address is one way, ken.ayars, A-Y-A-R-S, at dem.ri.gov.
I think it's up on the screen now.
Okay, great. My phone number is 222-2781, extension 4500. They can contact me or the department. I am Chief of the Division of Agriculture, but we work very closely with many other divisions in DEM, Marine Resources, Fish and Wildlife, Parks and Recreation. We are as collaborative as possible, and one of the things that's interesting of late is having farmers markets on state parks, which has done really well. So we do what we can to be synergistic within DEM.
Yeah, what a great idea, and I think we have to do that, being the small state.
Mm-hmm.
We can't have all these standalone islands of
Don't believe in silos.
I understand that you guys have recently announced the hiring of a new food chief. And I looked at that and said, what? We
Sure.
need a food chief? What will the food chief's job be, and why do we need one?
So the food chief, or director of food strategy, is a position created recently, reporting directly to the governors. This is the governor's initiative. And really the goal here is to elevate food to the same level of other priorities that we have as a state. We have plans for transportation, plans for energy, plans for climate change. We want to plan for food because it's that important. And we want to be able to tie in all the various aspects of food, from food insecurity to agricultural production to seafood to food safety regulations, and have a plan that elevates food and builds upon a strength that we have in Rhode Island and makes an important part of the state's economy. So that's unique. There's not many states that do this. We're one, certainly within DEM, who thinks it's a valuable idea, and it's a chance to elevate something that we're frankly pretty good at in Rhode Island. We have a vibrant local food economy. It should be recognized as an important part of the state's economy. And at the same time, when we understand the lay of the land, we can help deal with some other issues that are particularly important to many people, like issues of food insecurity, which is still prevalent in many parts of Rhode Island. And we think that a more robust, healthy food system will ultimately raise everybody's, raise the tide for everybody.
Okay, so this essentially has some, emergency planning aspects as well.
You could say emergency planning, but we want to deal with everything that's food connected, and we're thinking that a healthy food system will reach many parts of society and hopefully improve it. And our goal is to kind of have to capture what's going on, look for the linkages and look for the synergies. And this is an important issue for the governor, and I think it's one thing that's going to set Rhode Island ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a very smart move, and the idea of putting everything in this one basket. And now I assume the new food chief, has he or she been designated already?
She has. Sue Anderbois was just announced by the governor at Ag Day on May 10th.
Okay.
And she'll be starting sometime soon in state government. We are fortunate that we got some help from nonprofits to fund this position for the first couple of years. Kendall Foundation, Merck Foundation,
Yeah.
Dan Levinson, who are very interested in food systems work in Rhode Island. So we thank them for that. We'll be working closely with the Food Policy Council as well. But I think it's going to be great for Rhode Island that we are taking this initiative.
Yeah. How has that idea been received by farmers? Have you talked to your constituents, more or less?
Well, I have, not just farmers, but people that are involved in food work, land trusts, Food Policy Council. I think it's been very widely supported. Now, the proof's going to be in the pudding, and we have to put a plan together, and we have to make it work. For
and there'll be changes down
the road.
There'll
be changes. It's going to be a living document. So,
yeah.
It's not going to change the level of support that we provide agriculture. We're going to continue. That's going to be essentially part of the plan. But we're completely committed to helping our farmers out, and that won't change that or diminish it at all.
But I assume she will also work closely with you guys.
Oh, absolutely. So. She's actually embedded in the personnel structure of DEM, although reporting directly to the governor. So we'll be working with her daily.
Okay, I wish her well, and at some point, perhaps you'd come on the show and we could talk about it.
Sure, she would love to.
Yeah, well, that'd be great. Yeah. Let me go back to something you mentioned before, and that's the inheritance tax issue. And just to explain it from a dummy standpoint, the father dies, he passes the land on to his son, but the land is now worth a lot of money because it's land. The guy would like to keep farming it, but he can't afford the inheritance taxes.
Right.
And that's where I know Louis Escobar went through this and was able to get some relief. I wonder if you could explain that process to our audience.
Right, so that tax is due when the land transfers. And there's a couple ways to deal with it. One is that if we protect the farm and buy the development rights, then the value is agricultural. Land is normally taxed at highest and best use, and the highest and best use of a property is its development potential, condos or houses, whatever. Take that away because we protected it, and the assessment is based upon its agricultural value, which is far, far lower. So first of all, you knock the value down, the inheritance tax will be far less. The second thing is that the state legislature passed a law last year significantly increasing the exemption or the threshold that has to be reached before inheritance tax is actually due. So I don't recall what it is right now. It might be in the range of 1.5 million, but it was in the range of 900,000. So now you have to at least get to that 1.5 million before you owe taxes, state taxes. Below and before that, you only had to get to 900,000, for example. This
has been done elsewhere. It's not just a one-time thing for Louis Escobar, I assume.
No, I mean,
use it for a lot of people.
No, we celebrated last year protecting the 100th farm in Rhode Island. So there's 100 farms that have been permanently protected, more now, or 103. And that's just with state partner efforts. I mean, Aquidneck Island on its own often partners with us, but protects farms without state involvement. And so the number of farms total protected by all of our partners and friends who are involved in land protection is much higher than.
So you're talking about the Aquidneck Island Land Trust,
yes.
Chuckalot and those folks.
Great.
Yeah, they do yeoman's work here, I'll tell you.
They do. They're fantastic.
I guess the question is, this seems like a system that works. I just wonder if there's any reason to pursue changing the inheritance tax laws or something for farmers, so you wouldn't have to necessarily go through this process. Whereas they would retain then when they die, their successors might be able to sell it.
Personally, yes. I would prefer that there's far less pressure, simply because of changing from one generation to another generation, forcing something to happen that you don't want to happen in terms of farmers going out of business or having to make decisions to pay taxes. I agree is problematic. I don't know that I have the answers for that. I agree with you in spirit on it, though.
Well, because the big issue, the way this thing works is it kind of essentially locks up the property for open space or farming. That's it. Right,
and if the purpose is to pass a farm down from one generation to the other, you want to keep that same land use, then you don't want to have a person make a decision cutting off and selling parts of the land or even going out of business just for the sake of the taxes due. So completely agree. I don't know what the answers are above and beyond what I've said.
Yeah, but I wouldn't have a clue as to how to start doing that, having said that. Another issue that we've had in Portsmouth that's kind of dear to my heart in a way is we've had a several-year-long debate about what farmers can do in Portsmouth on their land. I think most people would agree that a lot of farms, you can't just rely on your farm products anymore.
Right.
You've got to come up with other activities. Louis Escobar, of course, brilliant guy, has come up with the corn maze, the fireworks, everything he does down there. But this debate has been essentially over. There was one property in particular, but it's just the general idea of allowing farms to do non-farming like things on their property to maintain their viability. It took, like I say, a couple of years of bickering back and forth. very recently it was finally resolved for the farmer, which I think is great. But there is a small but vocal part of the community that has this not in my backyard idea about these kind of activities, like weddings, for example, or things like that. How do you deal with that, and how can you guys help? What kind of help can we get from the state in terms of, I guess, regulations and other things that would
Sure.
resolve this issue?
So we get involved in individual situations, and the one that you described, I actively was involved with and sat through town meetings and testified often. We're happy with the outcome. One of the phenomenons that's happening because agriculture is coming back to life in a big way is that a lot of these pastoral farm fields are being worked, and there's activity, and a lot of times that activity is retail related, and sometimes that is objectionable to people that live bordering those farm fields, and we get complaints. In a general sense, I frame it that we have to think about where do we want to be, where does the next generation want to be in terms of its food system, and look at it from a bigger perspective. But other than that, we will get involved. We have to recognize and be sensitive to neighbors' concerns. There is a Right to Farm Act which does protect people in some sense. Ultimately, the answer is that local zoning has to be receptive and supportive, not just of the neighbors' issues, but the farmers' issues.
Yeah.
And there has to be a marriage there. And ultimately, what allowed the situation to be resolved in Portsmouth was that Portsmouth wrote a zoning ordinance and allowed a solution to happen. That took several years to happen, and Portsmouth should be credited for doing so. But the big message is that local communities have to have within comprehensive planning and zoning receptive and appropriate forward-thinking ordinances.
Yeah. So we're in the process of rewriting our comprehensive plan again.
Yeah.
I guess you do this every few years. And so this shows people how important those comprehensive plan things are.
It's vital,
There's
and
different
zoning
sections.
being reflective of the comp plan. So that's ultimately what was allowed the situation to be resolved, and that's really was our message all along from the state, is update your comprehensive plan, update your zoning ordinances, and allow it to work.
Yeah. Now, in your view, this zoning regulation that we've got in place now in Portsmouth, does that sort of resolve this going forward?
I think it does, not just for that situation, but for other ones, because it gives everybody a chance to have a voice. It allows the town to issue the necessary approvals.
Yeah.
But it also is supportive of the fact that ancillary activities, or agritourism, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
is really important to keeping farmers in business, and that's a phenomenon that we want to recognize and be supportive of in Rhode Island.
Yeah. And, everybody probably realizes the property we're talking about is Greenvale Vineyards.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, Nancy Parker Wilson bends over backwards to try to keep things as low-key as possible down there.
Mm-hmm.
But there are things they need to do. They just can't exist on the farm product alone.
True of many farms in the state.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we're just about out of time. I'd like to thank you very much for coming on the show.
Sure.
And I hope we can get you or your boss back sometime in the future.
Plenty of things to talk about at DEM.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Just a quick note to our local viewers. The Portsmouth Historical Society will be hosting a members open house on Sunday, 22 May. It's in a week and a half. And from 10 to 2 at the Society building on Union Street in East Main. Come on down and join us. I'll see you there. Thank you.